Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Dare to Age Well Now. I wanted to introduce the next two episodes because I sat down with Dr. Nathan Keiser, and most of our episodes here on Dare to Age Well Now are 15 to 20 minutes. And this episode stretched a lot longer because we went into kind of a lot of depth about both long COVID and POTS. And I didn't know a lot about kind of the biology behind those two. And so instead of having a very long episode, we are actually going to divide it into two episodes. So stay tuned. And the first one is going to be about long COVID. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Dare to Age Well Now. My name is Angela Belford. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Dr. Nathan Keiser. Dr. Nathan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a specialist in different types of brain injury, particularly ones that affect autonomic systems. I have a licensure as a chiropractor, and then I also have a specialty in clinical neurology, which has been a huge blessing for me because it lets me look at the problems that everybody else looks at, but just through a different window and a different lens, which helps to be able to just kind of bring a different mindset or different approach to the table and helping people in those particular areas.
There's a huge overlap in that Venn diagram between chiropractic and neurology. Yes?
Yeah, very much. So chiropractic is a tool that people use to be able to stimulate joints, muscles, mechanoreceptors in a way that sends a signal to the brain, and the brain's able to use that signal to recalibrate or recapitulate different areas. So if you take that same model and then you think about it as well, if we can take a receptor that's in a joint and we can use that to profoundly stimulate an area in the brain, what are all the other receptors that are available that can stimulate all the other areas within the brain? And then you can kind of zoom out on that and realize you can also affect skin and vision and the vestibular system or your inner ear or hearing or different other areas of movement or even your thoughts or emotions or feelings. And you realize that all of those different receptors are ways that we communicate with our brain. And if we do that with focus, intensity, consistency, then we learn, just like we learn a language or a musical instrument. And that becomes a modality for understanding, like how do you go from something that is dysfunctional to being able to pull it back on and be able to get it back online and working again. So that's like the broad view of how you take something like, chiropractic, cracking necks and cracking backs, and then how do you extrapolate that into affecting the brain writ large?
My brain is like spinning with ideas like, okay, wait. You're thinking about muscles and joints and how it's almost like reverse engineering.
I
Is
think
that what
that's
the
the
word
great
you're
way to think
saying?
about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the weird symptoms, we're going to get into long COVID here in a second, but one of the weird symptoms I had of COVID was every other day I was, I had vertigo. I'd never experienced this. And I will tell you that having something every other day happen to you, I felt like this giant hypochondriac. And so I was like, what is happening? So when you mentioned, anytime anybody mentions the vestibular system, I go, wait. That was the thing that was broken in me. Not broken, but dysfunctioning, right?
Absolutely.
So then I'd never thought about that. The exercises they gave me to reset that were reverse engineering, resetting my brain. Yes?
Yeah, I think that's a
Okay.
really smart way to think about that. Yeah, and I love that when you went to ask that question, you got in a stance, you were ready to go. But yeah, so the kind of the most profound thing about the vestibular system is it's the only one that never shuts off. So even when you are asleep, you are still within gravity. So your vestibular system has to stay on all the time. And if is an error in your way your brain is processing that information, it exists with you. So you go to bed with it, you wake up with it, you're exhausted, and you see this perseveration that happens. So what you may notice, and we haven't talked about this, so I don't know, but a lot of people will also notice that when they're having that sensation, when that system feels like it's overfiring, you lay down at night, you might feel like you're falling. You might feel like there's sparklers going off in your eyes, or like you're unsettled or moving. And that's one thing that even people without necessarily having vertigo, they may notice that even just with that otolithic system being off a little bit, you feel like you're on a boat, you feel like you're falling, or you feel those flashes in your eyes are signals even underneath that something's going on.
That's super fascinating. You work with a lot of patients that have long COVID, that have multiple areas. What are some of the other ways that this is showing up that we can think about this reverse engineering idea?
Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, if you think about it through that framework, basically, um, COVID or any of the kind of mechanisms we use to try to solve for COVID have a probability of affecting both nerves. So peripheral nerves, there was a if you were watching the news at that time, there was a lot of people that were getting Guillain-Barré syndrome, where you would have different peripheral nerves would kind of be chewed up by the virus, and then whether it was a sensory thing, they felt numbness, tingling, weird
Mm,
sensations, or they would get paretic, like a lot of people would get Bell's palsy, or they'd get weakness in an arm or weakness in their voice. But it's patchy, so wherever that virus goes, it will tend to affect areas in a non-equal distribution. So it kind of is like Swiss cheese all over the place. So that's one component. You can affect the peripheral nerves. Number two is you can affect the neurons, which are going to be in the brain or in the spinal cord. Same kind of thing where people may get dizzy. You may get inflammation in different areas, like your inner ear or within different areas of the brainstem. On and on we go. And those can affect literally anything in the brain, which is why long COVID feels so unique and different to different people, but it also has all of these things that are similar. Like we talked about Venn diagrams, there's all these Venn diagrams that have all this overlap. It looks like, a beautiful mind kind of drawing on the wall. And because the same thing, you can affect those patchy areas throughout the brain where we get these little scars, and then it has a hard time working. And then the third one that's really important is people talk about endothelial dysfunction. And that's a strange word. Endothelium is kind of the internal lining of the blood vessels, particularly the blood vessels that come from your heart and push out toward your body. When your heart beats, you also have kind of this wave that beats with the arteries, and it all has to be synchronized. And that's what allows the blood to travel smoothly in this nice vortex. And it makes it so it travels everywhere it's got to go with the minimal amount of effort. But the endothelium, its job is partially to contract and to be able to manage that. What we find is in a lot of long COVID people, that endothelial system doesn't work as well. So the muscular system that would control that contraction doesn't work as well, particularly in the brain. And it can cause people to have, we normally take it for granted that when you stand up, all the arteries in your body kind of constrict and you push a little bit more blood up to your brain, because it's got to push, you pump up against gravity, kind of like if you were pumping into like a water tower. So the
okay.
blood's got to go up, which means we got to readjust some things so that the blood can push upward. But what happens is that endothelial system doesn't work as well. The autonomic system doesn't work as well. We don't actually pump blood into the head as well. And you can measure that. And you can see that a lot of people will feel those fatigues, the things that kind of come with brain fog, just intense fatigue, feeling lightheaded when you stand up, high heart rate, low blood pressure sometimes, not always though, usually it compensates. And just all these things start to like snowball into each other, and it feels difficult because it looks like it's scattered around, but it's actually kind of hubs into this idea that we're just not able to deliver energy to the brain effectively. So all the things that the brain is in charge of, just kind of like you tune the volume down a little bit and they don't work as well. So a lot of people with long COVID experience that. And unfortunately, it's hard to solve for unless you want to think about it in terms of, well, how do I get those reflexes to kind of come on and work normally again? And that's a task that doesn't do well kind of in a conventional mindset, because this is not how people think about it. And so that's kind of where we got called into action, I suppose.
And so The people that I know that have really struggled with long COVID, fatigue is the thing that has been like, this is what's wiped them out. They're like, okay, I could survive the brain fog, I could survive but they just can't walk across
You
the,
just can't mobilize. Yeah, you just can't
yeah.
get up and going for sure. That's a
Yeah,
really good
they're like,
insight.
you can't willpower your way through it either. And so what have you been able to help? How have you help them?
That's a good question. So I think the first part that we run into is that we try to treat it as it's all one thing. So like long COVID
Mm,
is like you have long COVID and that's what we should treat. But I think that there's kind of like an intermediate step. Like you don't go from like symptoms to treatment. You go from symptoms and then you have to figure out like what's causing the symptoms in between. And we talk about in terms of what is the mechanism behind this. Like you use the term reverse engineering, and I like that. We try to figure out what is not working within the system that yields that symptom, and then how do we
mm,
solve that problem? And so it gives us the ability to not have to commit to trying to solve the symptom, but we're solving the mechanism. And then that is easier job to tackle because that's going to be individual to that person. So we can look at that person and say, what is wrong here? And then let's fix that. And then downstream of that, if we can get it to work again, then once that mechanism operates, then the symptoms don't have to be there anymore because they're a function of that mechanism. So I think that is the part that is probably a little bit different, is that we're kind of stopping to say, well, what's in between there? Rather than just judge it based on what you're feeling, let's see how it's working. And then from there, what receptors can we talk to? Can we influence? And we can do whatever we want, right? So we're just talking to a body. How do we do it? Is it through touching? Is it through standing? Is it through exercise? Is it through moving your eyes or moving your head or moving your whatever? It doesn't matter. Is it a way to talk to that area of the brain we're trying to talk to and see if we can get it to operate again? So an example of that, um, just real quick, we talked about that endothelial component, and that's kind of fresh on my mind after some cases. Um, and so you may think about, well, it's a reflex. So how do you get a reflex? Like you think about the reflex on your arm or on your knee. How do you get that to work again? And you realize you have to be able to stimulate it enough, but not too much. So if someone's easily fatigable, like you'd mentioned, the amount of stimulus you can give them actually is really, really small. But usually when we think about exercising people or training people, we give them a big stimulus. And what we actually do is pull it way back. So we may ask someone, hey, let's work on, instead of like getting up and going for a walk, which we know you can't do, what if we have you lay down and we watch the way you breathe and normalize the CO2 in the system? And if we do that, can we start to do more activity? And then can we add some eye movements to that and pull blood into the frontal lobe? Or can we give a stimulus through the inner ear that allows us to use that vestibular system to tell you where your head is in space? And we can kind of use that to pull blood to the part of the head that we're trying to pull it to, so that we're able to use those systems together again. And then just working up very slowly, rather than say like, let's just get you on a bike and let's get rolling. Let's start
right.
with like, let's go just above what you can do and then just start building it up from there. So there's a little more patience. It takes people more work, which is never what you want to hear when you're fatigued, but
Yeah.
you're actually building the system again the same way you build it from when you're a baby to a grown up. You're just kind of starting from the baseline again.
In my brain, I think in metaphors. I'm imagining that this is like a 21 point check for my car, right? We're going to
Yeah.
check the tire pressure. We're going to check the oil. We're going to check the fluids. We're going to check the wipers. Like as I'm imagining you're going through and going, okay, which one of the systems is not working, right? And oh, okay, we need to add fluids there, or we need to add air to the tire, that sort of thing. I don't know.
It's a very good metaphor. And we'll
It's
actually,
interesting.
to kind of be disarming, we will talk about it sometimes in terms of being a brain mechanic, because we're just trying to figure out there's
Mm,
nothing wrong. I mean, you know how it is. You go in and you've flown in from somewhere in the world and you're nervous and scared and you're afraid someone's going to tell you there's nothing wrong because that's what everybody else has been telling you. And sometimes we just have to say like, it's not like you're not doing anything wrong. There's not like you can't outwill yourself to win this battle. Like, let's try to just figure out how to repair this. And then so it's not fighting against you, or you don't feel like it's fighting against you. You can feel like you're one entity moving forward, and just taking that out of the like the blaming yourself part of feeling not well, and start to kind of feel like
Mm.
you're nurturing your body back to health rather than feeling like you're doing something wrong, if that makes sense.
It does make sense because the people that I've met that are like have had to retire early or worse, weren't even of an age that they could retire. There's so much loss of hope. Like I trusted my brain and I now can't trust my brain to get me even up to walk across the house.
Yeah,
It's really interesting because I would think it takes a lot of, you have to risk a lot of hope just to get on the plane to come and see if maybe somebody can help me.
absolutely. And I think I'd say that I'm very lucky for that in terms of when people come in and seek out my help. These are people that are already amazing people because they're willing to say, I'm going to bet on myself and try to fix this thing when everybody else has said something different than that. So it's they're already a selectively like beautifully stubborn group of people to start with, and they work like crazy. And it's not to say, you know, I'm sure a lot of people watch this at home and kind of feel like, I don't feel like I'm that. But everybody's got that part of them. It's just when you find something where you're like, oh, I think that's me. I think that could be me. So, yeah, a lot of reason to have conversations like this is to just to show people in the world what other people are doing and like how they're having success in that, and see if that resonates with them enough to see if they can inspire themselves to take those leaps as well.
So, what does make someone a good candidate to work with you?
That's a good question. I mean, I would think about that in a couple different ways. So, candidate in terms of like the things that we help are the things like we're talking about here, where they're problems that tend to reside within the brain and nervous system, within the vasculature, where we're seeing a breakdown in a feedback loop. So, the communication going in is not being interpreted the way that we would hope for, and therefore the outputs aren't giving us the normal outputs that would, you know, suggest like kind of normal human function. So like that's kind of the starting point, and that's going to lead to symptoms, and those symptoms are going to be the thing that create pain enough to where somebody seeks out help. And then I think the people that do the best, that tend to like be able to get the most out of that, are just people that are willing to say, I'm willing to just like do some work along the way. And we don't ask them to do work in the dark. So everything that we look at, we sit back together and say, like, okay, this is what we measure. What do you see here? This is what I see. If I were going to try to solve this problem, I would consider doing these things. What do you think? And say, do you want to work together on that? And then if we do, let's come back and measure it again in a couple of days and see if we can change the numbers. And if we can start to change the numbers, that's the beautiful part, because it means your brain is still viable, still strong enough to do it. We just have to do the right things in the right doses and do that for a long enough period of time to make it strong again. And so people that can take that and be able to just execute may not solve it in a couple days, but you may be able to make a change in a couple days. And that change, if you can continue to make it run, if you take that same thing, I don't, if you've ever read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, he says it so perfectly, where it's like 1% every day. You just have to do a little bit. And
Hmm.
most people would take the bet to say, like, if you could just do something every day and this was gone in a year, call it, or 6 months or whatever that number is, they would say, for sure, I'd do it. So if you can get them to just focus on doing those things long enough to get to a point of strength, then a lot of those people do really, really well, because they're able to extend that time preference so that they can work day by day to get themselves out. When you don't know what to do and you don't feel like you're doing the right things, it's really easy to start something and then talk yourself out of it. It's like, it didn't work in these 3 days, I'm not going to do it, because you don't have anything to anchor to be like, this is working and this is why, this is the problem I'm going to solve. And when you can anchor to that, like, I'm going to solve this problem, it's much easier to stay on track than if you're kind of like trying to cobble something together just to feel like you're not suffering for a short period of time. So like just shifting that model to like, I'm just going to try to fix this over a long term. And it might suck in the beginning, but it's better than like chasing things around and then having it suck for a long time. Sorry, that was kind of long-winded.
I love it. It's fantastic. I hope that you learned as much as I did about long COVID, and hope that you at least got an opportunity to follow Dr. Nathan Keiser on all of his social media. Next episode, we are actually going to get into POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And it is when you stand up, and he's going to explain this, but when you stand up, it causes you to have lightheadedness and dizziness and your heart to be racing. So stay tuned for the next episode.